How does a government trying to protect itself from a foreign invasion end up paying millions of dollars to get its own country bombed? It sounds completely insane, right? Like something out of a political thriller. But this is a true story. It's exactly what happened in Nigeria, and it's an incredible tale of backroom deals, media manipulation, and a geopolitical mess of epic proportions. So, picture this. It's Christmas Day 2025. A tweet pops up from President Trump announcing a military strike in Nigeria. The message to the world, it's a clean, righteous hit. America stepping in, protecting Christians from ISIS. It sounds like a simple story of good versus evil, a perfect holiday victory. But the truth, well, the truth on the ground was something else entirely. And this is where the official story immediately starts to fall apart. The official claim from Washington and Abuja was a successful joint operation, multiple terrorists down. But when reporters actually got out to the remote village of Tangaza, they found a very different scene. A charred donkey, confused cattle herders, and absolutely no signs of any insurgents. In fact, locals said they hadn't been there for weeks. So that brings us to the central mystery here. How on earth did a multi-million-dollar lobbying campaign, one that was specifically designed to stop America from getting involved, lead directly to American missiles hitting Nigerian soil? It just doesn't make sense. To figure this out, we've got to go back to the beginning. It really all started with a panic. See, a very powerful, very specific story was catching fire in the United States. And that story grew so big and so loud that it backed the Nigerian government into a corner, forcing them to make a really, really bad decision. And this was the tweet that lit the fuse. September 2025. President Trump, fired up by this narrative that was all over conservative media, puts out this direct threat. For Nigeria's President Tinubu, this wasn't just a PR problem. This was an existential threat to his government and, to his country's sovereignty. So, they hold a secret meeting. Nigeria's top defense officials are weighing their options. Option A, do nothing, just hope it all blows over. Way too risky. Option B, hire some lawyers. That's going to be way too slow. Which left them with option C, an aggressive, all-out lobbying blitz to get inside the White House and change Trump's mind, whatever it took. And that desperate choice gave birth to the plan. It was a secret, high-stakes contract with a single laser-focused goal: to completely change the story that the White House was hearing. And man, did it come with a hefty price tag. Yup, $9 million. And this wasn't going to some established, old-school firm. This massive payday went to a brand-new, pop-up lobbying shop that just happened to be full of former Trump aides and Republican insiders. They weren't hired for their diplomatic skills. They were hired to make a very specific problem disappear, and fast. Now look at what they were actually paid to do. The whole strategy is laid bare. This isn't about policy, it's about managing the perceptions of one guy. The goals were literally to get their words onto his teleprompter, get friendly articles into the papers he reads, and even make a video for his favorite TV show. This was a full-on influence operation. So where does a government just find $9 million lying around? Well, it came from a very controversial, very shadowy presidential fund called the Security Vote. Think of it as a giant off-the-books slush fund that the president can use for security with zero oversight from anyone. The entire deal was completely hidden from the Nigerian people and their lawmakers. Okay, so the money's in place. The lobbyists get to work. And this is where things go from just cynical politics to straight-up manufacturing a lie from scratch. I mean, just look at this. It's breathtaking. The lobbying firm paid a think tank for a report. The actual data in that report showed that nearly 3/4, 72%, of the victims in these conflicts were Muslim. But in the final summary, the version they pushed out to the media, that fact just disappeared. It was replaced by one misleading line: religious affiliation data is inconclusive. They didn't spin the facts, they buried. But a fake report isn't enough. You need a human face, a compelling character, and they found one. A guy named Daniel Okonkwo, a spare parts dealer from a city hundreds of miles away, was handpicked and transformed into a human rights documentarian. And the lie they built around him was just, wow. He got a $15,000 stipend. The video he showed to U.S. officials, which he claimed was from last month, was actually years old, from totally different conflicts back in 2021. And here's the kicker. That old, fake footage was screened for President Trump himself at the White House, cementing the exact false narrative they were trying to create. So, you can probably guess what happened next. The plan didn't just fail, it backfired in the most spectacular way imaginable. Instead of solving a crisis, this $9 million scheme created a much, much bigger one with fallout stretching from that small Nigerian village all the way to the international courts. So you're probably wondering, if it wasn't ISIS, who the heck was in that village? Turns out it was a local crew called the Lakurawa. They weren't a global terror network. They were basically a small-time gang, a few hundred guys running an extortion racket. The joint intelligence that led to the bombing, it was reportedly based on one single, unconfirmed source. And once that first thread of truth was pulled, the whole thing unraveled. And I mean fast. On January 14th, the New York Times drops its bombshell story. 6 days later, the Nigerian parliament is scrambling to find the missing $9 million. By the 25th, the president's approval rating is in an absolute freefall. And by the 27th, even President Trump is backing away from his original claim. And it wasn't just a PR disaster. Oh no. The lawyers got involved. The International Criminal Court started looking into potential war crimes. A regional court took up a $47 million lawsuit from the local farmers. And back in the States, the Department of Justice opened its own investigation into the lobbying firm. The whole thing was blowing up. And you can see right here what this did to President Tinubu back home. His support just fell off a cliff. In just a few months, his approval rating tanked from over 50% down to 34%. In a tragic twist, the secret plan to look strong on the world stage made his government look corrupt and totally incompetent to its own people. So after all that, what's the big takeaway? What can we learn from this incredible, disastrous chain of events about how power and information actually work today? I think the scariest lesson here is about what happens when foreign policy gets put up for sale. This story is a huge warning that international relations can become just another transaction, a marketplace where you can literally rent access to a leader's ego. And sometimes that leads to very real bombs falling on very real people. But, it's easy to get lost in the $9 million contracts and the geopolitical games. We can't forget who actually paid the price. This quote from one of the survivors in Tangaza, it just says everything. They said America came to save Christians. My Muslim son is the one in the grave. These people were just caught in the crossfire of a story that had nothing to do with them, a story written and sold in Washington, D.C. This whole mess, from start to finish, was driven by money and influence. And it leaves us with a question we should probably ask ourselves a lot more often. The next time you see a simple black and white story about a crisis somewhere in the world, just pause for a second and ask, who might be paying to make that story true?